Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Los Angeles, Columbus, Ohio, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. So let me ask you, why do you think that the deep state is so dead set against Donald Trump? Because that's my one way. I was talking with Chris Hedges, and he's like, he has no hope. And I was like, well, I can't live like that. I have to have some hope, and my hope is that somebody's trying to kill Donald Trump. And I know that sounds like a weird way to have hope, but that's what gives me hope, because that means that he's a thorn in the side of someone, and I've got to think it's the deep state and the war machine. Why do you think they're so dead set against him?
And it's real. I mean, I sort of wondered about, I'm with you on this. I have wondered for years, how deep is the resistance to Trump? Is this pro wrestling? Because there was a sense in which all the previous debates that I was engaged in from, the early 90s until maybe 2016 were fake. It was like Republicans and Democrats were so different, but they weren't, and I fell for it. So I've been alive to the possibility that's happening again, but it's not. I mean, they really will do anything to stop Trump, and I think, that says something really good about him. If the worst people in the world will totally destroy your country to prevent you from taking power, you're probably the right guy to run it. I personally think the problem with Trump is disclosure. I think they've committed a lot of crimes. I don't know that, actually. I think that's a fact. I don't think I'm even guessing. I mean, what happened to all the money to Ukraine? There's never been an audit. And I think that and 100 other things. And I think if you get an unsympathetic president in there who might be crazy enough to declassify some of this stuff, we don't know the details because it's all classified, which is infuriating. The 9/11 documents are still classified, amazingly, 23 years later. Why is that? You don't need to be a conspiracy nut to ask the question, what's the answer?
Because Dick Cheney is still alive.
Because they're covering in their crimes, right?
So that's it. So they're afraid that because they don't control him and he didn't come up through the two-party system, he might reveal their crimes.
Well, look, they impeached and removed Richard Nixon. Who replaced him? Well, it was Gerald Ford of Grand Rapids, Michigan, who was a member of the Warren Commission. And why did he replace him? Because once they took out Nixon's sitting actual elected vice president, Spiro Agnew, and I'm not defending any of these people, I'm just saying this is what happened. Carl Albert, who was the Democratic speaker, said to the Republican president, "This is the VP you're taking." And he was their guy. This is just the way DC has worked for at least 60 years, probably a lot longer. There's collusion at the highest level on the most important issues. They can debate, trans bathrooms or whatever, but on questions of the economy and war, there's a bipartisan consensus. And Trump is the first person in the past 50 years to break that consensus. And that's not acceptable. So it's all of Washington against Trump. All my former friends. All people who were Republicans. I thought we had a lot in common. I thought I was a Republican. I thought a lot of things that were false at the time, but they're all against Trump. Liz Cheney's one of them. The Bush family. It's the degree to which the entire Republican Party, the legacy Republican Party, the Republican Party that existed in 2016 when Trump arrived, all of them are opposed to Trump. And that just reveals the nature of the system right there, I think.
I learned watching your show that you talked about President Nixon and him being impeached, and it had a lot to do with the investigation by Bob Woodward and Bernstein. Now, Bob Woodward, I found out, where did he come from, and why does that matter?
Well, Bob Woodward was a naval intel officer who had been detailed to the Nixon White House. He'd been sent over from the Pentagon to the Nixon White House. And then a year later, somehow, he's the star reporter on the Metro staff of the nation's capital's biggest newspaper, and he's got the biggest story in modern American history. Now, where does he get that story? He gets it from the number 2 guy at the FBI. That's Deep Throat, Mark Felt. It's the number 2 guy at the FBI. And what's the story about? Well, it's about a group of burglars who break into an annex of the Democratic National Committee, the Watergate building, and all but one of them are CIA employees. So what you're looking at, if you take 3 steps back, is and this is not a defense of Nixon. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. My views are evolving. But just as a factual matter, you're watching permanent Washington, bipartisan, ending democracy, making the most popular president in American history resign because they decided on a bipartisan basis that, for whatever reasons, he's unacceptable. And that's just what happened. And they lied about it. Bob Woodward lied about it. Bob Woodward this was an op. I worked in a newspaper. I've been in this all my life. The guy who has no journalism experience doesn't show up at the Washington freaking Post and get the most important story in the country in 2 months. That doesn't happen. When he's just been a naval intel officer? I mean, come on now. It's absurd.
Look at Kamala Harris's fucking resume, seriously, it's like, what did she do? Like, there's actually no actual evidence that she actually tried any of these cases that she was a DA for. And how does she get this job? How does she become VP? How does she, it's the same thing.
I think she became VP the same way Gerald Ford became VP. It's the same way that the permanent state installed her. She was forced on Joe Biden. She was their first choice, by the way. She was anointed on Martha's Vineyard. The donor class said that they wanted her to be the female Barack Obama, and then she couldn't get a vote. She had to drop out before Iowa, and they still found a way to get her in there. And so here we are. And now she's the nominee without ever having to go through a primary, without ever having to get a vote. And that's from the party that's putting democracy on the ballot. And as Jim Gaffigan said, they had to do a coup to make sure democracy won. Hey, come see us on tour. We're going to be in Los Angeles, Columbus, Ohio, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.